Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to our event. Lovely to see so many of you here. We're here for the SI Leeds Literary Prize panel event with our finalists from this year's SI Leeds Prize. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the SI Leeds Prize as well as its partnership with Luton Literature Festival this year. My name is Mahsuda Snaith, by the way. I should have probably said that. I'm here to host today and to ask questions to our panellists. So first of all, the SI Leeds Prize is a biannual literature prize founded in 2011 for Black and Asian female writers. I won the prize myself in 2014, and it really was a pivotal moment for me in my writing career. I talked a bit about this earlier in my event earlier in the day, that it was just a great moment for me to validate that I'm a writer and that other people want to hear my story. So it was brilliant to be part of it, let alone win it. This event is the first blossoming of the partnership between the prize and Luton Literature Festival, which takes me nicely to a message from Luton Literature Festival organisers. At Luton Literature, everything we do is about enabling access to books and literature, providing creative writing projects, encouraging storytelling, enabling children and young adults to work with published authors, running our own not-for-profit bookshop where we hold book clubs and poetry nights. Mostly it's about giving those who haven't been able to or haven't had the confidence the chance to engage with the literary arts and books in a way that previously they haven't. As part of this, being given the opportunity to link with SI Leeds Literary Prize for this year's book festival has been a truly wonderful thing. To be able to work with an organisation so focused on and successful at championing the voices of Black and Asian women who haven't yet been published is inspirational and aligned with the aims we aspire to achieve. We very much look forward to future work and encouraging those here in Luton and Bedfordshire to come forward and submit work for the next prize. So today, as I said, we are really fortunate because we've got every single finalist of this year's SI Leeds Prize with us. We have Maeve Clarke, starting from this end, Nazish Lane, Angelita Lapuz Bradney, Arathi Menon, Jac Shreeves-Lee, and Pauline Walker. And the way we're going to do this event is you're going to be in for a treat because I not only get to ask each panellist a question, you get to hear a little bit of the excerpts from the actual stories that were submitted. So we're going to start just generally asking a general question to all of the panellists about how you got into writing, what is your writing journey, and what was your path to becoming shortlisted for the prize. So I'm going to start with Maeve for that one.
I'll try and keep it short. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? That's a bit better. Short version. I was living in Italy and I used to have a recurring dream. And in the dream, I would find a trapdoor in the street on the way to work. I'd go down the trapdoor and I'd find myself in the medieval version of the city. And there'd be a woman on a horse with a lance riding towards me, and I was on a horse with a lance. We'd ride towards each other, but then there was never any impact. I'd wake up, a couple of weeks would pass, same dream again. The third time I had the dream, I was down in this medieval world with my husband and child, and I was strapping on all my arms and things like that, and he was saying, "Oh, can't you just talk about problems like normal people, and like a normal person?" Same thing again, we rode towards each other. There was no impact, but this time when I woke up from the dream, I was still in the dream, went to the bathroom, washed my face, and the face looking back at me was the face of the woman who had been on the horse. I thought, oh, that would make a really good story. So I tried to write a story set in medieval times. After a chapter, I gave up, discovered other things, came back to the UK, did some writing courses, and I've written a bit for Theatre for Education. And this one's been a long time cooking, let's say. There's been lots of different versions, but I think hopefully I've got it together in the right order. So I'm trying to say this really quickly so I don't take up too much time. Is that?
That's great, thank you.
Hi everyone, mine's a little less dramatic. I actually think writing chooses you. I don't think you actually set out to start writing, because there are a lot more lucrative careers than a lot less stressful paths to follow. And I think most of us were probably bookworms. And to steal a description from Stephen King, who said books are portable magic, and that always stayed with me. So I always thought, I can't really do this as a job, because it always felt like a hobby, something I enjoyed. Didn't want to follow the journalism route, because I was very much embedded in fiction, storytelling. So I became a lawyer instead. And I did that for a while. But that feeling of wanting to write, that urgency, just stayed with me. So I switched to an MA in screen and theatre, and carved out a niche for myself, which was sort of social activism and theatre, which was great for a while. But then, obviously, the pandemic hit, and then I switched to, I did the Faber novel course, and here we are, book. We keep moving. Yeah.
Hi, so I suppose like the others, I've always wanted to be a writer, but also I chose a sensible job, sensible degree, and it wasn't until I had my first child when I thought, you want to be a writer, so why didn't you get started? So that's when I sort of really started writing. It's 14 years ago, and I did some writing courses. I started with short stories. They were pretty terrible at first, but I gradually improved, and then eventually had some published and even won some prizes, which was great. But I always really wanted to write a novel, so I started doing that down the line as well. And a few years ago, I actually took a year out of my job to do an MA in creative writing, which is when I really sort of worked on Wildwood, my shortlisted novel. And what gave me a boost when I was doing that was that my mum gave me a notebook where she'd written down stories about her childhood in the Philippines and sort of accounts of what it was like growing up there. And, you know, that gave me such a boost because, first of all, it felt like she was giving me permission to use those stories and to draw on them in my manuscript. And I learnt so much about, you know, the traditions that she grew up with, the food she ate, the sort of folklore that surrounded her family. And that's what really sort of, I felt, brought my story to life. And so I feel very sort of strongly about this particular manuscript. And yeah, we'll see where it goes. Thank you.
Hi, I think all of us knew we want to be writers because before we even became one. And I'm an immigrant here, and I've been here 7 years. And I think whilst, you know, I'm trying to be, you know, whatever color they want to put me into a little box, you know, I'm trying to be someone who works a day job and also write in the margins. I think writing gives me freedom. It just helps me be whoever I want to be. And with the SI Leeds Literary Prize, I mean, this novel has been on a lot of short lists and long lists. It was once on a long, long list, whatever that means. I think this prize is different because, you know, it's given us this platform. I'm here, I'm speaking to real humans who've, you know, read my book other than my 4 best friends and 1 suffering husband. And I think that is amazing because it's lonely, and not all writers are lucky and get instant success. But for some of us, this is that little, you know, little tap on the back we need, you know, keep going. Someone believes in you.
Thank you. Hi, nice to see everybody. My name's Jac Shreeves-Lee. Thinking about my writing journey, I think it begins when I was about 4 or 5 years old, to be honest with you, because I used to pretend that I could read and pretend that I could write. I'd do little scribbles and pretend that they said once upon a time, to the amusement of my friends and my family. So I've always liked writing, and I've always known about the power of words. My parents came from Jamaica in 1955 to this country, and every month my mother would receive a letter from her mother, a little blue airmail letter, which was a bit like a parcel. And she'd open it up every month, and it would always say, "To my dearest daughter," and it would end, "From your loving mother." And these letters were like nuggets of gold. They were so precious. And my mother kept them behind the clock. So I knew when I was a girl growing up that letters and writing were really, really important. And that stayed with me. My dad would take me off to the library and say, "Jac, you know, books are really important. Education, education." A bit like Tony Blair, but not quite. But yeah, so reading, writing books, literature has been very, very much a part of my life and my personal journey. I became an English teacher for a while, and then I retrained and did something else. And more recently, I did an MA at Birkbeck in creative writing, and that was a huge boost to my own writing performance and my understanding of words and how they work. And I fell in love with poetry and literature all over again. And this prize and meeting these other writers today has been phenomenal. I really feel that I'm at home. As you've said, it can be a very, very lonely journey, but a very, very important and a very rewarding one. Thank you.
Hi. I never really wanted to be a writer. That wasn't a big desire. I wanted to be an actress, actually, when I was growing up. But I fell in love with words and writing. I've always loved literature and drama. And in my 30s, I did a literature degree with the Open University. And the module for the last year was a creative writing module. So we've been studying prose, poetry, life writing, and it was our chance to actually write ourselves. So that's when I actually fell in love with writing. I thought, well, let's give this a go. And then I started writing short stories and plays and entering short stories in competitions and for anthologies. And I won a short story writing competition. So that gave me the validation that you were talking about earlier in terms of like, well, actually you can write. People are responding to what you're writing to. And I've been aware of this prize since it started in 2012. And I always thought to myself, well, if I ever write a novel, I'd love to actually send it into the SI Leeds Prize. So I'm really excited that it's long-listed at first and now shortlisted. And then the idea for my actual novel that was entered in the prize came from, because my novel is a dystopian novel, you'll hear a little bit more about it later, but the idea for it came from watching Nick Griffin, who was the leader of the BNP, on Question Time back in 2009. And there's an idea that sort of came out of that about immigration and, you know, if they got back into power, where would they send people away from this country? So that was an idea that kind of stayed with me for a very long time. And this novel really is about exploring that.
Thank you, everyone. I think it's so fascinating to hear about everyone's different journeys. And I think it really shows how different everybody's journey has been to get where you are. So thanks so much for sharing that. So we get to hear a little excerpt now, Trapped Between Two Worlds, which is by Maeve Clarke.
Okay, so just basically, this is the story of some schoolgirls who are kidnapped by boy soldiers. And this is an excerpt taken from when the soldiers have just arrived. "We must share out the girls," one of the soldiers says. "Yes, but I will decide." The slightly older-looking boy, who I have named Boy Boss, steps forward. Tall and lean with skinny muscles, he wears a necklace of white shells, bright against his dark skin. Slowly, he paces along Mercy's row, pauses behind each girl, watches as she shrinks into her body, holding her breath. Gently, he caresses their necks with his gun, as if he's running an iron over delicate material, and then presses harder and then harder until their heads hang forward, necks drooping like the stems of dying flowers. Only Mercy resists, holding her head high, her spine stiff and rigid. She stares at me, willing me to look at her and to do the same when it is my turn. Boy Boss presses the gun into the back of her neck. It must hurt, but she does not yield. "Why are you not showing the proper respect?" he asks. "Bow your head. Or perhaps you would like me to help you." He leans into the gun until slowly her neck bends forward. "Ha," he says, nodding with satisfaction. "I will enjoy breaking you." And then he hits her in the back of her head with a swift blow, and she slumps forward. "You." Butterflies beat wings tipped with steel deep in my stomach as he swivels and points in my direction. I do not need to do my sideways look to see that beside me, Honey is shaking like a newborn calf. Boy boss tucks his gun in his waistband. The motion so deliberate, so unhurried that I cannot look away. Hypnotized by his slow motion walk towards us, I am unable to raise my eyes above his ankles. With each step, his boots send up tiny, mushroom-shaped puffs of dust which settle on the toe caps. With each step, my ears fill with the thunderous beat of my heart, and I hold my breath between each stride, as if by barely breathing, I can make myself invisible. Boy boss stops in front of us. You, he says again, fat girl. From the corner of one eye, I see him squat, cup Honey's chin in one slim hand, and tilt her face upwards. With his other hand, he caresses the handle of his pistol. You, he tells her, are mine. Such simple words, yet so much power. Honey has stopped quivering and does not move. From beneath her skirt, a thin, dark line of liquid zigzags lazily towards me, before disappearing into the thirsty mouth of the earth.
Thank you, Maeve. That was great. So, Trapped Between Two Worlds is a novel about Esther, a teenager whose experience of being kidnapped in her native country of Africa results in her entering the UK and joining a sewing club for asylum seekers. This novel explores topics such as friendship, child soldiers, and seeking refuge in a new country. What initially inspired you to explore this story, and how did you navigate writing about such complex issues?
It's a good question. It's so long ago. But partly it was because I read a line in a poem which says, "No one leaves home unless home is in the mouth of a shark." And in that period, I was also doing I teach English, and I was teaching English as a volunteer with people who were refugees and asylum seekers. And I think working with those people, one, made me feel really humble and grateful for everything that I had, because the things I was kind of taking for granted, oh, I've only got a little place, oh, I don't have a garden, it all falls into perspective. But also, you would see young people who were sort of cast adrift, in a sense, in a country and a culture and a system that they didn't understand. And I wanted to explore that, not just what happens when boy soldiers arrive, because there have been books about boy soldiers, but there's not very much about the girls and women that are affected. And I didn't just want to concentrate on what might have happened in this unnamed African country. It's also what happens when they find a new home. And is it the home it's meant to be? So that was the general idea. And then once I started writing Esther, who's the 14-year-old, even though my idea was to go left, she took me to the right. And so I ended up not following what she wanted, but it was almost as if she was poking me in the back and saying, I wouldn't do that, and the story developed as she grew, and I just really loved her. I loved her approach to life and her survival skills, and just how she navigated being a child and yet an adult at the same time.
Thank you, Maeve. I love it when a character says no. You have all these plans. That's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that with us. Okay, so now we get to hear a little excerpt from God in a Butcher Shop, which is by Nazish Khan Lane.
Thank you. So this excerpt is from when my protagonist is revisiting a memory as a young child. My sister Rosa had demanded a 2-tier glittery gatto in the shape of a unicorn for her 6th birthday. I was 12 at the time, and the night before her party, I lay in bed, kneading my thick stomach flesh with my knuckles, trying to press it into the empty spaces inside. Uncle Billy had come over during the day to drop Rosa's present off, a glamorous styling head, complete with hairbrushes and makeup. I thought of the leftover decapitated doll running around in high heels, searching for its crown, and it made me feel sad. Uncle Billy shook the doll's bodiless head so her hair whipped around her and made Rosa laugh. I felt jealous. I couldn't eat dinner that evening, and Dad sent me to my room. Not running a hotel here, Kiva. Best behaviour tomorrow. Fridges at night started to keep my secrets. Delicious secrets lit up with the soft click of the door opening. I found myself gorging through the pink sugary mane, sinking my fingers in and clawing at the soft, sweet sponge like a feral beast devouring its prey. I couldn't swallow quickly enough and gulp down large lumps of cake so that my throat had to deal with all the forced happiness. When I finally stopped, clutching for breath, spraying crumbs with my spit, I turned to see my mum's ghostly slender form standing in the kitchen doorway. I was wearing my old pyjamas that clung to my broad, chunky frame. During the day, I always wore oversized tracksuits, no matter how much I boiled. The mess I'd made came into focus. The unicorn face had sunk in on itself. I'd eaten the chocolate button eyes, one of its blue-iced cheeks, and even stripped it of its magic by scoffing the silver horn. The fridge shelves were smeared in chunks of wet jam, and my feet were sticky with icing on the linoleum. My hands were thick in cake, dripping in guilt. But her gaze was elsewhere. She was fixated on my legs, on my fat, brown, drumstick-shaped legs covered in goosebumps like pimply chicken skin. There were no gaps between my thighs. A generous flesh hung on my knees, and my ankles were carved with the indents from the day's socks. I shifted, trying to unstick my legs from each other, trying to make space in my mass. But she just kept staring, unblinking, and the slow, cold realization came over me that she wasn't awake. She was sleepwalking. Maybe she would grab a big kitchen knife and charge at me, stab me, do what she really wanted, erase me. And for a moment, I think I wanted her to. Frightened, I raced back into my bedroom. I shook as I stuck my fingers down my throat, making myself sick, the sugar turning sour as it came back up.
Thank you, Nazish. That was beautiful. So God in a Butcher's Shop is a multi-perspective, multi-generational novel about inherited trauma and parental neglect, which spans through the 1960s to the 2000s. You've moved between humour and tragedy in this novel through a vast array of characters and eras. And that made me really think about how you must have had to navigate all of those different voices, those different eras. So how did you get around the technical side of showing so many viewpoints in so many different times?
Okay, well, in terms of the technicality, I think with so many moving parts with different characters and timelines, you need something that's fixed. You need a fixed event that you always refer back to. So it's a bit like when you first start learning to write an essay and you're always told to refer back to the question. So whatever the timeline is or where the character is in that space, you can't drift too far from the main event. So in my case, it was a party that took place in the 80s. And every character, want, need, dread, desire, is leading up to the events of that party and then the aftermath. So it all comes around to this party. In terms of writing for different timelines, this was just purely by trial and error. I found, for me personally, when I'm writing, a bit like a method actor, I just disappeared into that timeline. So whether it's what was, at the top of the charts in music, what was happening politically around the world, films. For the 60s and 70s, I watched a lot of Bollywood movies, so I was, quite well versed. And then I wrote my characters in that timeline, so I didn't write it in a linear fashion. So I wrote all the characters in their timeline with their full arcs, and then I sort of plaited them, and then cut through to make sure all the threads added up, and that was the only way I could do it.
Lovely. You've made that sound far more simple than I imagine it was to do.
Not 4 years after the event, yeah.
Great. Thanks so much, Nazish. We are now going to hear from Angelita Lapuz Bradney's Wild Wood.
Thank you. So this extract is about Grace, who's a 14-year-old girl living in the mountain province of the northern Philippines, and the year is 1971. Later, Grace had to deliver the freshly picked coffee to Auntie Carla at the market. The sun was high in the sky, and from the upstairs window she could see steam rising from the washed clothes that Auntie Ronnie had laid on the corrugated iron roof to dry. "Man and Grace!" It was Jake, aged 11. He was the oldest of her 2 brothers. "Where are you going?" "To see Auntie Carla at the market." Jake grabbed the coffee bag from the table and held it to his nose. Can I come with you?" "Why?" Outside, there were shouts and scuffles as the boys from the neighbourhood took turns to pin each other down in the dust. Jake lowered his voice. "Paco says the Kalinga have come down from the mountains." Grace didn't know much about the Kalinga people, but she knew that they were headhunters. When she was a child, Auntie Ronnie used to tell her that the Kalinga would drink her blood if she didn't obey her parents. "So what if they have?" "I'll carry the bag for you." Grace pretended to think it over. "All right, come on." A rooster shrieked as they descended the steps to the yard. Tatang had let 2 of his fighting cocks out of their cages, and the birds were circling each other in the dust. Their heads were bent low, feathers splayed like knives. In a whirl of plumes and whipping claws, one of the birds launched forward. The other flew up to meet it. Tatang and another man separated them after a few seconds. The cockerels weren't hurt. They weren't wearing the spurs that would be tied to their legs for the real fights. Tatang's prize bird was a cockerel called Number 1, a monster with a hammer-shaped head and scraggy orange neck feathers. Where its comb should have been was a red stump. Tatang had cut it off and fed it to the bird to give it strength. Grace had only been to a cockfight once. Uncle Lito had taken her, with Jake and her cousin boy, to the arena at the edge of town. She remembered the noise of the crowd, the men frantically signalling their bets to the Christo, the fog of sweat and male excitement. Tatang was there, but he spent most of his time with the other competitors in the roped-off area where they prepared cockerels for fights and stitched up their wounds afterwards. The clashes between the birds were short and brutal. As soon as they flew at each other, the crowd erupted, shouting and waving their arms. There was one fight where the winning bird didn't know when to stop. Its opponent lay in the dirt like a heap of old feathers, while the victor continued slicing at it with its spurs. Blood spattered the sawdust. That day, Tatang and Uncle Lito came away from the fights with a great handful of pesos. Tatang paid for a tricycle to take the 3 children home, while he and Uncle Lito stayed behind to drink lambanog with the other competitors. "Manang?" Jake touched her arm. "Shall we go to the market now?" Grace turned from where she'd been watching the birds. "Yes, what are you waiting for? Take this." She shoved the Bowie bag at him and they left the yard. Thank you.
So Wildwood is a Gothic novel which explores past traumas and generational dynamics as a family meets in a crumbling cottage in the Forest of Dean. The novel contains apparitions, witches, and Filipino folklore. This story was in part inspired by your mother's tumultuous childhood in the northern Philippines, as well as folklore in general. How did you balance writing about real-life events alongside the more mystical and fictionalised elements of the novel?
Well, for me, I think it was actually really easy to balance those 2 elements. For the story I wanted to tell, the folklore and the mysticism seemed really closely woven into the characters' experience of what they were living through and what they were trying to get to grips with. For example, my main character, Nina, the the guilt she feels about her past is personified in this apparition she sees whenever she visits her childhood home in the Forest of Dean, the home that's called Wildwood. And the settings as well really facilitated that interweaving of the mystical and the real life. For example, in the Forest of Dean, it's one of the UK's most ancient landscapes, and there's a lot of folklore around that area. For example, King Arthur's bones are said to lie there, as well as in many other places, I'm sure. There's a stone that apparently bleeds when you prick it with a pin. There are enchanted pools, witches. So there's such a lot of folklore around that area. And obviously, I've already mentioned in the Philippines, the accounts I read from my mum were very much intertwined with the superstition and the folklore that the community sort of grew up with, as well as the way that Catholicism and its rituals sat there alongside their day-to-day lives. So all that was really fascinating to me, and it was very much part of the story I wanted to tell. So it just came naturally.
Okay. Sounds fantastic. Thanks so much for that. Okay, our next excerpt comes from Arathi Menon, and this is from her book, Dar.
Hi, before I begin the excerpt, 2 words to keep in mind. Achachan means grandfather and Achama means grandmother. I put the samosa back on the plate. You can see its beheaded corner and my teeth marks just below. I say it's too spicy for me. The adults immediately understand and don't give me a lecture about wasting food. It's great being a kid. There is no conversation while all this happens, which is entirely normal. Achama is muttering Ganesha's name today. Every day she chants a different god's name under her breath. I can tell the day of the week by her mumbles. Monday Shiva's, Tuesday Hanuman, Wednesday's Ganesha, Thursday Krishna, Friday's Mahalakshmi, Saturday's Shani, and Sunday's Surya. I wouldn't mind being one of Achama's gods. I would only have to work once a week. She never pauses while repeating their names. When does she ask them for something? I have tested it out. You can't chant loudly and ask for a boon silently in your head. For the next hour, Achama chants. I play on my iPad, Dar surfs his phone, and Achama reads the paper. When the clock strikes 8, Achama walks into the kitchen to get dinner. She places 4 plates on the table. I secretly exchange my good glass for the chipped one and make sure I get the bent spoon. Rice, dal, yucky beans, and cucumber salad. We serve ourselves and begin eating. I take a mouthful. The food is worse than the samosa. I don't understand what is wrong. Why does the food taste so weird? It has all the right colors and textures, but when I put it in my mouth, it tastes like a paper or a pillow cover. It tastes of something that has no taste. I look at Dar. He's sending a message. He still hasn't begun eating. Achachan and Achama are tucking away like it's the best meal they have ever eaten. Do they eat faster with us so that dinner gets over quickly and we leave? Dar takes a spoonful and spits it out on the plate in front of everybody. He begins yelling, "How dare you serve this crap to me and my son? It is tasteless. Can't you at least put a little effort in your cooking? I know you are incapable of being decent parents, but can't you treat your grandson a little better?" He goes on, bringing up the past, right from when they gave him a half pencil to be taken to school on his first day. All the other kids had new pencils and pencil boxes, to when they forgot to congratulate him on getting his first job. I stop eating and wait patiently for all the words to leave him. I like to time his rants. The longest has been 40 minutes and the shortest is 18. This one's average, 24 minutes. Finally, he stops, exhausted by the history of his emotions. I get up, I know the drill. We will walk out. Achachan, Achama won't say a thing. Neither will they try to stop us. This time, it's different. In a soft voice, Achama says she's sorry about the salt. Achachan and she have BP, so they have stopped adding it to their food. She goes to the kitchen and brings out a small steel cylindrical container which has turmeric and chili stains on the outside. Achama measures spices with her hands, taking a pinch of this a handful of that, throwing it into the kadai. Unlike Da, who has measuring spoons with ml and grams clearly marked. I feel sorry for her, an old lady with tiny bony hands holding out a steel box of salt to an angry son. Thank you.
Thank you. So Da is a comical, bittersweet tale about a 13-year-old boy in India called Ved and his relationship with his adoptive Da, who is actually his uncle. Their loving relationship carries the weight of one unspoken secret, that Da is gay and that Ved must not tell anyone as homosexuality is illegal in India. Reading the opening of this novel, I was struck by the touchingly affectionate nature of the relationship between the two characters. Was there a reason that you wanted to explore this dynamic between a teenage boy and his adoptive father, as well as how the secret they both have to keep affects that relationship?
Thank you, Mahsuda. In the beginning, I should say homosexuality is legal in India now. There is no problem. The novel is set in 2013. And I think subconsciously this novel would have begun when I was in my 20s, when homosexuality was illegal. And, you know, I had a lot of friends who were gay, who were queer. And, when I was doing my undergrad, we'd sneak out for the Pride March, which was, it was small, but it was still beautiful. And we'd be doing something illegal, walking the streets of Bangalore in India, saying, love is all you need. Love is right. And I think when I became a writer, it sort of struck me, we all know the suffering of the victims. But what about the suffering of the people who are close to victims? The sons, the lovers, the husbands, the wives of victims. How did they suffer? And that's how I tried to tell the story. A little bit about the process, because I love to hear this kind of thing when I come for LitFest. I don't know whether you all feel the same, but I tried many voices. I tried it in the father's voice, but I'm not a gay man. I've tried it in third person. It just didn't feel like it was getting the emotion I wanted. And finally, I hit on Wade, the 13-year-old boy. I'm not a little boy, but I was a tomboy, if that helps. And I thought I'll also mention a few influences of mine when I was reading this, because I sort of focus on the minutiae, What happens when you're waiting in a bus stop? What happens between the black and the white, the gray? So authors that I really loved when I wrote this was Tobias Wolff, about a boy, John Banwell, The Sea. There was the poetry of Charles Simic, and I'd probably say Catcher in the Rye, But, yeah.
Thank you for those extra bonus bits.
Yeah, I love getting reading recommendations.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Arathi. Okay, so now we were going to hear from The House That Jack Built by Jac Shreeves-Lee.
Thank you. Lost. Opening the front door, Naomi spots the waiting minicab, a sleek silvery car twinned with a full chalk-white moon. Neither the car nor its driver are known to her, and they have been sent by the minicab company she regularly uses. She hasn't tried Uber and mistrusts what she's heard about the driver's false friendliness and the star rating system. The nip in the night air bites at her cheeks as she draws the warm woolen scarf closely round her neck. Here it is, another blue night. She draws some secret satisfaction from sailing in London's murk. Naomi understands the pull. As she climbs into the back of the car and slides onto the upholstered seats, the driver chirps, "Evening, Naomi. I'm Bartek." His accent grinds between his teeth. "So, where are we going tonight?" he asks. "Hackney," Naomi answers, staring through the side window. "You have an address?" She shakes her head. "No, it's a round trip. Just drive to Hackney and back. Thank you." Bartek
presses a random Hackney postcode into his sat-nav before his hands grip the steering wheel and he starts driving. Lifting the tiny lever that lowers a window, Naomi breathes in the cool air. The night smells of moon, a tinny, mercurial scent. The blinds of night have fallen, but like all moon-eyed people, Naomi sees better in the dark. Maybe tonight, she thinks. You're a regular customer, eh, Naomi? Yes, Michael is my usual driver. Oh, he's sick. Flu? No, a stomach bug. Bartek pulls a face. He's eaten something bad. Naomi allows herself to meet Bartek's sharp green eyes in the rear-view mirror as his cab surfs the moonlit streets. Where are you from, he asks. London. But my parents were Jamaican. You don't look Jamaican. She feels Bartek's eyes travel across her light brown face and hazel eyes. What do Jamaicans look like? She says. Bartek shifts in his seat and flicks his eyes back onto the road. The Jamaican motto is, out of many, one people, Naomi says. We come in all shades and sizes. An oncoming car veers across the road. Bartek brakes hard and blasts his horn at the Mercedes driver. Every Saturday night, the same thing, Bartek sighs. Crazy drivers and roadworks, roadworks, roadworks. Naomi gazes ahead at the long line of traffic where buses trundle along like scarlet lanterns. Further down the high road, her eyes graze over lumpen bundles of homeless men and women sheathed in cardboard boxes and sleeping bags. She stares into Enzo's, a Turkish barber shop, stage-lit and luminous. Large red leather chairs seat the men poised for their shaved back and sides, while blindingly white sinks sit against a wall like Hollywood veneers. Snip, snip, snip. If only thoughts and desires could be so easily pruned. As the minicab glides past the Old Bell pub, Naomi leans forward to watch a knot of young people jostling and roaring loud into the night. Slow down, she whispers. Her eyes bead and narrow as she looks across at the men and women, searching their faces. Drive on, she finally says, sitting back. Are you looking for someone? Bartek asks, but she doesn't reply. We all lose someone, he says. My grandmother told me that after the Second World War in Poland, everyone was missing someone. Everyone was lost. She never saw her sister or brother again. Naomi tugs her scarf tighter around her neck and pulls away from Bartek's eyes. They drive past the Alaudo Equiano Primary School, silent and still, with its playground now empty of movement, laughter and voices. This is where her son, Delroy, learned to read, write and fight back. She remembers the children's flying green uniforms as they hullabalooed through the heavy school gates. Thank you.
Thank you, Jac. So The House That Jac Built is a collection of interlinked stories that begins where we started there, with a mother who goes in search of her missing son and distributes missing person flyers across London. These flyers are interpreted by different characters in the novel who are experiencing their own emotional whirlwind. There is a nuance to the writing here that makes us see each character's perspective with empathy. Why did you decide to show the array of human difference and similarity in these interlinked stories? And did you always consider them as belonging to one longer piece, or did that format come over time?
Thank you for the question. I think when I'm writing, I begin with character. Character's very, very important and very central for me.
and I allow the characters to lead me where they will, rather than having a plot into which I force and manipulate and constrain my characters. So I allow my characters to take me where they will. And in the book, there is one character who's a very sort of upright landlady who finds herself sneaking into the room of one of her lodgers and sniffing at her underwear, which surprised me when I was writing. So sometimes my characters surprise me. I think I grew up on a very, very long, winding road in Tottenham, and I still live on a fairly long road. And all of our stories collided, connected. As neighbours, we kind of shared sugar bowls and gossip and stories and tragedies and laughter. And I was aware when I was growing up on my road, and I'm still aware now on the road that I'm living on, that our stories do kind of intersect. Although we live behind our own front doors, we come together and we influence one another. And my book is very much about that, about the fact that we impact one another in different ways, sometimes totally unknowingly, but we connect, we are connected, even though those connections are not necessarily explicit or known. In terms of empathy and nuance, my work, my profession, I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and I've been very fortunate, I think, and blessed to work with a whole range of people from different walks of life who've undergone various kinds of hardships. I've worked with children within the care system and adults who are very troubled, many of whom have been offenders and perpetrators. And I've had the job of trying to understand those people and trying to understand their journeys and how they got to where they got to, in a way to try and explain and understand their actions. Sometimes their actions were horrific and very, very difficult to understand. But I think doing that work over many, many years gives you a kind of insight, a kind of feeling for other people. It means emptying yourself or trying to empty yourself to get to where that person is. But you can always use that knowledge, that understanding in your writing. And I hope I've used some of that in my writing and in this book.
It's so fascinating. Thanks
you.
for giving us that answer,
Thank you.
Jac. And finally, we have our last excerpt from Pauline Walker and her book, Welcome Home.
This extract is from chapter 2 of the novel Welcome Home. And just to say that at the end of chapter 1, 2 of my characters have been in a car accident. Blazing light burnt through the leaden darkness. Why do they keep asking who I am? Of course I'm Alec Carrow. But he heard someone repeating his old name. Alexander. Insistent. Sander, Sander. And he shuddered. Only Mum and Dad call him Sander, and she can't be here. She's buried in the... Dad, he can't be here. Sander. Alec's medicine ball head rolled slowly on the pillow. No, it can't be him. No. Son. Mild concussion can cause confusion, Mr. President, said Dr. Humphrey, the Director of Medicine. Why don't you let my consultant take you to my office while we do our checks? Alec wiggled the fingers and the toes on his right foot. He tried with his left side. The leg was heavy, and it hurt when he tried to move it. Careful. A medic shifted the pillow underneath the leg. A blood pressure cuff tightened around his bicep, and his tongue was stuck to the roof of his mouth as he tried to answer, "What is your name? Where are you? What's your date of birth?" An injection into a drip infusion brought the darkness again. When he woke, refractions of memories spun through his mind, and he tried to grasp images, faces, words, colours, feelings. Thoughts slowed, and he captured Kiki's smile, held it. Candlelight. Her skin glowed, shimmering brown. Yellow and grey stripes. The aroma of curry. He lifted his head and pushed through the discomfort in his neck, His voice was hoarse. Kiki, is she okay? Baby. The medic spoke to the Medi-Assist, an invisible panel on the wall behind the bed. A male doctor in grey scrubs entered and scrutinised Alex's face. I'm Dr. Humphrey. Alexander Dubbock, it's a pleasure to meet you. He noted the fear on the patient's face. Do you know where you are? Hospital, rasped Alec. You were in a car accident, do you remember? Accident. What is your date of birth? Kiki, my wife, she's pregnant. Let's deal with you first. Date of birth. 2nd of May, 2053. Age? My wife. Please, Mr. Dubbock. Stop calling me that. I'm 31, okay? I want to see my wife. Is she hurt? He tried to rise. Careful, keep that leg still. I'll get your father. No. Alec grasped Humphrey's forearm. How did he find me? Alec's fingers slid off Humphrey, and he clawed at the sheet, flung it aside. He gasped when he saw his left leg. Shin, ankle, and half his foot covered in a cast. You have a fracture of the tibia. Clean break, said Humphrey. The swelling has gone down and we'll fit you with a boot before you're released. You're not in any pain? My dad. Alec's chest started to pound. You've done well, staying fit and healthy for so long. No operations, no blood drawn, no DNA, no entry on the national database. Until now. 100% match to our great leader. Fear churned in Alec's gut, and his gaze darted around the room and stopped on the image projected on the wall. The same image that was projected on his classroom wall, in all public buildings, and burnt into digital billboards, the face of President Dubbock. The eyes became Humphrey's eyes, and he laughed, and he was laughing at Alex as he clasped Alec's chin, naked now the beard was gone. Your father wanted visual confirmation too, of the cleft chin. You're his spitting image without the beard. He's eager to see you.
Thank you, Pauline. I didn't want to say this before, but in case it jinxed the last person, but I think everybody read so amazingly well. And also great to hear how very different everybody's pieces were. Okay, so Pauline, Welcome Home is a pacey dystopian novel set in 2084. It focuses on the characters of Kiki, a black woman, and her husband Alec, a white man, who live in the downtrodden Black Quarter, oppressed beneath drone-darkened skies. The world you describe as both vivid and chilling. Was there a particular draw you felt to write about a dystopian future? I know you've mentioned a bit about where the inspiration came from. And how did you decide what the rules of this world would be?
Well, it didn't start out as a dystopian novel, and it was not something that I thought or a genre that I could write. It started out very much as a contemporary novel, and very much responding to my anger, really, at what I mentioned before about seeing Nick Griffin on Question Time, and the question that just kept not leaving me, nagging me, was, well, where would I go? This is my home. I'm born here, very proud of my Jamaican heritage, but this is my home. So because within my own family, I didn't grow up in a political family, so this is another thing. I didn't think I could write a book that was about politics in any way, and I come at it from character as well. But I needed to know a little bit more about the black presence within Britain and multiculturalism. So when I started thinking about it and thinking about characters and plot, I thought, actually, there's a gap in my knowledge. I need to know much more about multiculturalism and in the UK and why people are so angry about immigration and all these things. So I spent about a year reading lots of books and just getting the characters and the plot together. So, as I say, it started out very much as a contemporary novel, but it was becoming this very big and unwieldy beast. And I didn't have an ending, and I was just very much responding to the politics at the time. We had the Arab Spring. And also just to say that this novel has gone through about 14 years before it was I felt ready to actually properly send it out. And we've had Trump's first presidency. We are now going to have Trump's second presidency. And authoritarianism was happening a lot more around the world. We had the Arab Spring. Liberal democracies are kind of failing. So I'm coming at it from this point of view. I want to write this story. I don't know anything about politics, really, because we didn't have political conversations in our household as we were growing up. But it was just becoming too big, too unwieldy. I went to the novel studio, which was at City University of London, with other writers, where we could critique each other's work and kind of learn from each other. And then I kind of realised, actually, I'm getting kind of bogged down in the politics, and I really want to tell a story. So I was thinking, well, how can I do that? And I thought, well, I'll just set it in the future, and that would actually just release me creatively to just make up the world as I wanted to make it up. So to turn it into a dystopian novel, and obviously through my reading life, I had read 1984 by George Orwell and The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. And they are oppressive societies, and that's kind of the feeling that I wanted in my novel. So I thought about, well, I set it in the future. I need to find out a little bit more about technology and what technology could look like in the future. So I did a bit of research around that, and then just took what was in my novel in terms of like the government. What would the government look like then, you know, in the future? What would housing, employment, all those things, and how would we have policing? So the drones were in the novel in an earlier draft, but actually they became the symbol of oppression for the whole novel. So that's really how it became a dystopian novel.
Great. Thank you. Again, that's surprising. Thanks so much, everybody. I still have a couple of questions, and I realise we have kind of come up to time, so we may run over a little. And I would really like to get at least one or two questions from the audience. But we will also be going all down to the cafe later. So if you do want to come down and have a chat with the finalists here, you're more than welcome to. Please do. So my first question, and this is really open to anybody who wants to answer it, is do you have any thoughts or experiences about barriers to representation of Black and Asian women writers in the literary ecology, which I realise is always a really difficult question to answer, because part of the problem, I think, when you're a writer of colour is you don't know what the barriers are because nobody's telling you. But if you've had any experiences yourself, it would be great to hear about it. Anybody who would like to open up on that one?
You're looking at me, I've got the mic, okay, everyone's looking at... I suppose not overtly, that I'm aware of. If I send stuff off, I'm sending it off, it's usually anonymous as a submission, or you use a pseudonym, or something like that. Obviously, we're all aware that these things exist, so I'm not pretending that it doesn't. What I am more aware of is barriers related to class, if you're working class, and having access to time, to money to write, to knowing how to network and who to network with. And then I'm certain that then within that there are barriers, but if you're asking me personally, there probably have been, but I don't know. So in some ways, I'm not happy in the ignorance, but it just means that I can focus more on what it is that I want to do, which is to write a story and for it to be accepted on the basis of my ability and not because I'm, you know, British of Jamaican origin or I'm from an ethnic minority. Should be, for me, I want my work to be treated with respect because it's a good piece of work.
Thank you.
I have, I'll keep it brief because I know we're short of time. So once I completed the manuscript, I sent it off to agents, as we do. And an agent from actually quite a large firm called in the full manuscript, read it, and we had a meeting. And it was the first time I'd ever faced this. And one of my characters in the book is a trans person who's actually Black Muslim from Pakistan, because in Karachi there's actually a Black community. And they all speak Urdu, and it blew my mind that they were the minority within the minority. So this character has this heritage, this background. And the agent said she loved all of the book. It was great. She said, but this one character, she said, can you just water them down a bit? And I said, well, what does that mean? And she said, well, they're Muslim and they're Black, and they're from this community in Karachi, and they're trans. And I said, but people have those backgrounds. I mean, we all come from somewhere. And she just said, they're too complicated. And it was the first time it struck me that actually being complicated appears to be a privilege as well. And that was the first time I went away with a new thought. Otherwise, you know, it hadn't even crossed my mind that that would be a problem.
Okay, thanks. That's really insightful, isn't it? That even though we're all complicated people, certain people are allowed to be complicated and others not too complicated. We don't want to confuse people too much. Great, thanks. Any other experiences?
I wouldn't say mine is an experience per se, but just wanted to make the point about looking for an agent. So a lot, you know, if you go to lots of events, literary events, where you're talking about being a writer or wanting to become a writer, you're told to look in the Writers and Artists Yearbook. So that in and of itself is a project for, you know, 2-3 days, looking at agents who might want to, who take certain genres. So I've just used my novel, dystopian novel. So a few months ago, I started looking at, okay, who could I approach as a literary agent for dystopian fiction? And then you look them up in the book, and then you look them up online, and then you look at who they represent. So that would be my first call. If they represent Black women, Asian women, then I think, okay, then I might have a chance of actually interesting this person in my work. So that's how I approach it, really.
Okay, that's really interesting. Thanks.
Yes, just to say that I think when I first started sending my stuff out, the responses I would get would be something along the lines of, we're not sure that there is a market for this kind of work. But I'm glad to say that as the years have gone on, I think there is more curiosity about voices that were previously seen as othered. So other perspectives are now getting the attention that they deserve. And I think there has been a shift because much earlier on, I didn't have the success that I did or have done more recently. But certainly at the beginning, I felt that there were some barriers and a lack of interest. I remember I went on a workshop with the Arvin Foundation many years ago, and I was very fortunate to do a workshop with Alison Lurie, who's now sadly passed away, but she was a wonderful writer. And she read some of my writing and was very encouraging. She was a very lovely lady and very encouraging, and said, Jac, it's such a shame that you're not in the States, because had you been in the USA, your writing would have been much easier to actually get your writing out there. But it is tougher here in the UK. And Alison recognised that as a white woman, American woman.
Great. Thanks so much for those insights. I'm going to go to our last question before we open up to questions to the audience, which is just to ask each and every one of you if you've got any advice you would give to other, particularly women writers who want to write a book. Shall we start with Pauline this time, just to mix it up?
Just to say, always being W through my whole life, you're always at the end of the queue, because being Walker. But yes, I think find something that you're passionate about or that makes you angry, like I was angry, and just really trust your own instincts for what you want to do. Join a writers group so you can critique each other's work and actually get that sense of community, because writing is a very lonely process. And for me, over my 13, 14 years of writing this novel, you learn very much that it's a marathon, not a sprint. So you need resilience and, as I say, trust your instincts to keep going. And yeah, that's all I would say at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you.
I would say don't give up. Resilience is key, because if you give up on yourself, the door of opportunity, even if it wants to open, can't. So just keep writing, do what you do, and believe in yourself.
Yeah, I think just to kind of reiterate what you've both said, keep writing, keep talking and meeting with other writers. Although I love short stories and novels, and I didn't answer the question earlier properly about my short stories, but actually in my head it is a novel because they come together. But just to say, my great love actually is poetry. So although I read short stories and novels, poetry is often where I begin. So don't forget those wonderful poets. Dig them out, read them, and the new modern poets too. But I think poetry actually gives us something here, very visceral. So keep reading poetry too.
Well, I fully echo all that. I mean, I think you just need to ask yourself, if I'm not going to do it now, then when am I going to do it? Stephen King said, when the muse visits, she has to find you working. So you've got to be sitting at your desk, you've got to be writing. You might not feel inspired, but if you're not having a go, then inspiration is never going to come. So just get going and follow your dreams.
I'd actually say be selfish, because as women, we are often primary carers for children, we have responsibility to family, and on top of that, you're juggling work, and you've got to learn to say no to things and actually say, look, I'm writing. And you need to take yourself, because if you don't respect your work, no one else is, and you get tugged in a lot of directions. So I'd say just be selfish, and even if that's 10, 15 minutes a day, you just take that time for yourself. And it also holds you accountable. If you've told enough people, not enough to put too much pressure on you because people think they're about to attend your book launch, but just enough to hold yourself accountable. And you'll get there eventually. So be selfish.
I think you've said a lot of what I was going to say, which is if you can find time to write a diary, for example, you can find time to write, and it doesn't have to be at a desk, it can be anywhere. And it could be an idea scribbled on the back of a receipt that you then work on later. But it is important to just squeeze a little bit of time out of each day and not think that you need to have an hour and you need to have the latest laptop or program or anything like that. Just sit down, pen and paper, do it. It will come together.
Well, I'm already feeling inspired by that, so I hope you all are too. Okay, let's see if we can squeeze in a question from the audience, if anybody's got one. Don't know if somebody... I'll take the mic to wherever you are so that people who are live streaming can hear. Has anybody got a question? Oh, you've got one. Great. She's on it.
Well done. I thought that was fantastic. What an amazing range of stories. Just wanted to ask what you're all working on next, really.
Okay. Right. Shall we start with you, Maeve?
Okay, I'm C, so at the start. I'm currently trying to do two things. One is a play for radio about female chain makers from the Black Country who made the chains for, dogs and horses, but were also responsible for the smaller chains used in slavery. But they were on strike because they were being paid less than men. And they were successful in that strike, and that strike established the notion of minimum pay in the UK. And it's an unknown story. Well, you know it now, but don't write it, please, because it's mine. But it's something that really interests me. And the other thing is a novel, which is set between Jamaica and the UK. It's all about folklore and superstition and what happens if you don't obey your mum and you creep out of the house at night and meet somebody that you shouldn't.
Oh, very good. Thank you.
So that's it.
I'm writing Maeve's book. No, I've started my second novel. It's about all the houses I've lived in me personally, the protagonist, written in sort of a memoir form, following PTSD and trauma. Her therapist is taking her through all the houses, and she's an interior designer, so that I'm accessing that world.
Fantastic, thank you.
Well, I've got a couple of things I'm playing around with. The first is a murder mystery set in the Channel Islands, and the second is a romance stroke ghost story featuring female mathematicians from the past and present.
I'm just amazed by how much people are writing. This is great. Artie?
I'm working on an adult novel about dysfunctionality, unhappiness, all those good bits. It's basically about how you survive your own self. And I've also write children's books, so I've written one and two more in the series. hopefully going to get commissioned.
I'm working on a novel at the moment, which is about a woman who's living in an older people's care home. She's looking back at her life. She is a child of a Windrush family. So the story is kind of set in the 50s and 60s in the sense that she's looking back a great deal. So we switch between what's happening in her life now to what happened in her life when she was a young girl, a child. And there is one very, very tragic and traumatic event that happens that ripples throughout the rest of her life with huge, huge consequences. So that's what I'm working on at the moment.
I'm trying to write a happy novel. I don't know if I have it in me. But anyway, I'm working on a novel about family secrets, and that's all I'll say.
That's fabulous, thank you. Do we have time for one more question? Do we know? Or does anybody have one more question? Because if you don't, that answers the question for me. Oh, one up the back. Great.
Hello, everyone. Well done. Sorry, I've come in a bit late. To do with family, of course. Run around the children first. I am a writer. I've got 2 novels in the market. My problem is I've self-published. The issue I have is having to find a reliable literary agent. How did you go about it? Did you self-publish first, or do you have to go through an agency? And is it going to be a traditional contract or
Have any of you guys got an
contribution
agent?
base?
None of us have agents. I would say keep sending your book to prizes such as these, like the SI Leeds Literary Literary Prize. Yeah.
What I can say about self-publishing is you have to be very driven to do it. And I think you'll learn so much skills from doing that. And sometimes publishers, if you do very well, will pay attention to that. Yeah. But yes, it's the, I'm afraid, boring thing of looking through all the websites, seeing if somebody's got the...
It's a job by itself.
It is. Got some... I would look for agents that represent work, as Pauline said, that is similar to your own. That doesn't mean they, it has to... It's not going to be the same, but similar so that you know that they know how to work with your type of work, and then just send out and keep on trying. It is, I'm afraid, that boring kind of just keep going at it, and eventually the right person will hopefully find it. But it is just as hard to find an agent as it is to find a publisher. It's one of those tricky things. But don't take out of account how much you've learnt from doing self-publishing and getting that far.
Yeah. Excellent, thank you.
So we will all be going down to the cafe. If you want to come and have a chat with everyone, then you're more than welcome. But for now, thank you all for coming, and let's give ourselves a big round of applause to this great panel. Thank you.